Today's a great victory. It's a great victory for Sean Combs. It's a great victory for the jury system. You saw that the Southern District of New York prosecutors came at him with all that they had. They're not stopping, but one thing stands between all of us and a prison, and that is a jury of 12 citizens.
New updates in the Sean Diddy Combs legal saga. The rap mogul gets an official sentencing date. He gets hit with allegations from a shocking new lawsuit. A juror speaks out, and also, apparently, Diddy receives a standing ovation from inmates?
Something wasn't right from the minute Diddy entered the courtroom that morning. The bluster had vanished. A hollow silence took the place of the characteristic swagger. Even though his costume was flawless as usual, the guy inside appeared, smaller, as if the gravity of what was about to happen had finally set him.
Until verdict in the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial, the question now is, what is next for him, right? You got sentencing, civil suits, a lot to get into. So while Combs was acquitted of racketeering conspiracy and the sex trafficking charges that he was facing, he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution. Currently, sentencing is set for October 3rd. However, there is a hearing set for July 8th where the defense will be arguing for the sentencing date to be expedited, to happen sooner. Obviously, they want that, considering Combs was also denied bail yet again, despite arguments from his legal counsel after the verdict that he should be released on bond. It didn't happen. They want to make sure this happens as quickly as possible. But what will he be sentenced to, really? That's the question. And also, will the government seize his assets? What about all of those civil lawsuits that he faces? Well, Judge Arun Subramanian had sent a tentative October 3rd sentencing date for Diddy on his convictions of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Remember, that's what he was convicted of. He was acquitted of racketeering conspiracy, and he was acquitted of the 2 sex trafficking counts, but he was convicted of these prostitution charges. And at one point, there was reporting that defense counsel for Sean Combs and prosecutors, they had then agreed to switch the date to September 22nd. And we thought, okay, because today's hearing was supposed to be about expediting the October hearing. Then they agreed to September 22nd. Now apparently it's back to October 3rd. This is all over the place. Very confusing. We'll get it straightened out. I gotta say it's interesting because Combs' defense counsel had originally stated last week, when it was the October 3rd date, that they wanted that sentencing expedited, meaning they wanted it to happen sooner. And one of the things that Sean Combs' attorney, Mark Agnifilo, had said was, quote, the mother of some of his children had passed away many years ago. These kids, the 2 daughters here sitting in the middle of Your Honor's second row, don't have a parent. Obviously referring to the death of Kim Porter in 2018, mother of Christian, Jesse, Delilah, Quincy. And by the way, remember Sean Combs was denied bail, so it wasn't even like he got to go home after the verdict. But clearly they wanted this expedited. They want his sentencing to happen as quickly as possible. They want him out of jail. They want him out of prison as soon as possible. And also it's interesting because prosecutors, they need time for the pre-sentencing investigation and report. Basically, that's when a probation officer interviews the defendant, looks at the history, the background, childhood, education, employment, criminal history, finances, the mental and physical health of the defendant. There are interviews that are conducted with family and friends. The officer looks at various court and school records, employment records, financial records. The officer could speak to the victims in the case, law enforcement that were involved in the investigation, provide all of this information in a report to the judge, because here the judge is going to have a lot of discretion when it comes to the sentence. What could a sentence look like? Well, prosecutors indicated in a filing that before even doing a pre-sentencing investigation, Combs is looking at 51 to 63 months, a little over 4 to 5 years in prison. The defense seems to be pushing for 21 to 27 months, so a little over 1.5 to 2 years. But remember, Combs has been sitting in federal lockup since September at the MDC. So if he gets time served, he really wouldn't be spending that much time behind bars. Now, of course, there are the extremes. When you talk about transportation to engage in prostitution, the maximum for each count is 10 years in prison. You stack them together, you get 20 years. Okay, based upon the facts in this case, it seems highly unlikely he would get that much. Other side, you get the idea. There's no minimum for this charge. So could he get time served and walk free? Also seems unlikely, in that you're dealing with multiple instances of transporting Jane and Cassie, the 2 victims in this case, and men across state lines for the purpose.
As he entered, people whispered. The media leaned in. In utter quiet, the victims watched. There was no tension in the air. It was oppressive. Everyone was aware that everything will change today. The judge then came in. There was silence. In the room, no phone sounded. There was no wasting of breath. The atmosphere froze. There was only the echo of the judge's gavel and the constant shuffle of his robe. "Get up, Mr. Combs." Diddy slowly stood with his hands shaking and his gaze fixed on the ground. The trial's claims, testimony, and the masses of evidence that had poured in like a deluge were all recounted by the judge first. All the details were exposed. Every secret was brought to light. Crimes weren't the only thing involved. It dealt with trends and a history of control, coercion, and manipulation. The same portrait has been painted by witness after witness. Nightmares replaced, parties, promises made in secrecy, contracts signed under duress, and lives lost in quiet. However, the stillness had ended. With an unwavering voice, the judge stated that the court had considered the evidence. The effect on the victims has been taken into account.
Gotta ask you, your reaction to the verdict, is it what you expected?
Well, hearkening back to, I don't know, we were talking about this, you and I, a couple of months ago, and I gotta say, whether it's fun to be right or not in a case like this, we were both right. This was never a good fit for RICO for a lot of different reasons. And the consent element regarding the sex trafficking was always problematic. And I thought the prosecution here did a good job presenting their case. They did a good job presenting their theory. But when you match in a trial context, when you match like professorial and kind of plotting, which is the way a lot of government lawyers are, versus dynamic and engaging and that personality of the defense, it's always a mismatch. You're always up against it. And the Mann Act, like we talked about, I thought he was going down on that after like the second day of testimony. The problem is for the prosecution, the Mann Act is a very old law, and it was essentially legislative morality from about 100 years ago, where it was transporting prostitutes across state lines. The intent may have been good. It was essentially a very early version of sex trafficking, but it was really more an attempt to stop prostitution, which is, as we know, never going to happen. So almost every lonely guy in New York City who's going through a divorce, who is having a problem in the dating pool, who has some sex worker drive over from New Jersey, if he buys her Uber or his Uber, theoretically, that's a violation of the Mann Act. So that is it's not the same type of crime. There's no mandatory minimum under federal law. The judge does not have to. Right, they don't have to. Now, it carries up to 10 years per event, so he faces up to 20 years. The prosecution, I think, is asking for 46 months or something like that. They're asking for far less than that.
If the case was, if they had called, let's say, Christina Courtroom, okay, this chief of staff who had been mentioned, I think, by almost every witness, and she said, hey, listen, there was a criminal enterprise, okay? We were all a part of it. Everybody knew what the job description was. My job was to do this. His job was to do this. You think they would have gotten racketeering? If they didn't include Jane, who was arguably the more problematic testimony, I mean, Sean Combs still paying her rent, messages that she was setting up a lot of these sexual encounters. Cassie had messages too that were problematic that showed if we're talking about whether she was a willing participant or not. But if you focus just on Cassie and you didn't call in Jane, or you didn't call in a Mia, or you didn't call in a Brianna Bengolan, if you limited the case, and now it's so easy to play, Monday morning quarterback or armchair lawyer here, but do you feel that the prosecution could have won this case if they structured it differently, if they called different witnesses?
That's a great question, and that's something that these prosecutors will literally be wondering for the rest of their lives, for the rest of their careers. They're going to be wondering if they'd done it differently, would the impact upon the jury and would the result have been different. The fundamental problem, I think, is that this was kind of always a round peg in a square hole. The arson, that domestic violence video that we all watched, that's horrific, all of that should have been prosecuted as state crimes in Los Angeles. That as a fundamental, starting point.
Well, they couldn't do it now. It was time barred.
No, of course, the statute is run on everything. Yep. But that would have been, he would have been prosecuted for exactly what he did. Instead of predicate acts.
It has recognized the abuse of influence, notoriety, and power. Heartbeats could be heard. Accordingly, the judge went on. This court hereby sentences you, Sean Combs, to 60 years in federal prison. The room blew up. Shock, shouts, and gasps. They fumbled for their phones. Reporters, persona fades. It is no longer possible to cover the cracks. They were dropped by some. A woman let out a scream. In the gallery, a man broke down in tears. It wasn't merely a phrase. It was a reckoning. Did he, too? He cracked. The mask broke the instant the number was uttered. His shoulders slumped, and he let out a series of sobs. This was not anger. This was hopelessness. Unfiltered, unbridled hopelessness. His lawyers stepped in to comfort him. However, they appeared shaken as well. This was more than just a severe punishment. This was a message for all those who were observing. Once more, the judge's voice broke through. Retaliation is not the point of this. Accountability is at issue here. Power has concealed the truth for far too long. The truth is tall now. The press had already heard from outside. The headlines started blasting. Reactions caused social feeds to collapse. Once standing by Diddy's side, celebrities either made evasive remarks or remained mute. The industry shook. The judge ordered an urgent transfer inside the courtroom. No house arrest, no delays, and no emotional appeals. Diddy was escorted in handcuffs. And the icon was gone as he turned to take one last look around the room. A man drowning in the consequences he believed he could outrun. No stardom, no billionaire. Long after he left, the courtroom remained motionless. The survivors shed tears. A few people held one another. Some remained motionless, not thinking it had truly occurred. Without saying another word, the judge left. Outside, the world witnessed a legend come to an end. Because history was altered in that room when the gavel fell and the sentence was read, not only for Diddy, but for all victims who believed their tale was unimportant. It does now. It always will now. However, the storm did not end there. It was just the start. The repercussions of Diddy's sentencing continued to reverberate throughout the entertainment industry as he was processed into the federal system.
Go to a very long case. We'll see what the judge kind of goes for in terms of the sentencing. It could be, like you had mentioned, to the lower side, to the higher side. But I hate guessing in this trial at this point because every guess that I've made has been completely wrong. So.
No, we both agreed he would get convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution, racketeering, sex trafficking, both up in the air. I'm not surprised by the jury's decision, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and Jesse, just some more to the schedule. For any post-verdict motions, the parties proposed that the defense file any post-verdict motions on or before July 30th of this year, and the government respond on or before August 20th. And then the government requests that if they be permitted to submit its summary of offense conduct on or before July 11th of 2025, and the defense doesn't object to that. So we'll see a lot more documents being filed that we're able to kind of talk about, hopefully a little bit more, but it seems that it's just a bunch of documents that'll be filed before the eventual sentencing hearing.
You know what I think is interesting? The post-trial motions. So typically speaking, those could be like a motion for a new trial where the court would vacate the judgment and allow for a new trial, rarely granted, but may be done if the interest of justice so requires. There's a motion for judgment of acquittal. So the court could set aside the jury's verdict, allow the defendant to go free. And there's a motion to vacate, set aside, or correct a sentence. And I'm told that it's often successful for the purpose of correcting when there's a clerical error in the sentence. Now, assuming Combs has valid legal grounds to support any of this, I imagine he will file whatever motion he can for relief from either the verdict or the sentence. Then again, I don't know. He got a very favorable ruling. Obviously, he was convicted. He's not entirely happy with it. And his defense counsel explained that. But they also, in their press conference after the verdict, they were jubilant. They were ecstatic. And I wonder if he gets a favorable sentence, is he even going to challenge this? I mean, they seem happy.
Yeah, they seem ecstatic because the emotions that kind of ran outside of the courtroom, it was kind of double that inside the courtroom where all the defense attorneys were hugging, they were crying. So seeing them outside in the press conference, all kind of holding hands, going up, that was just a little slice of the cake from what we all saw inside that federal courtroom. But I think it can kind of go both ways, and that's mainly because Sean Combs is still behind bars right now. The judge didn't grant him bail even after the verdict. And I think his reasoning might give us a little kind of picture into what the sentencing might possibly look like, because the judge even pointed out during his denying of Diddy's bail after his conviction, which were on counts 3 and 5, kind of talking back to what had happened in June of 2024 with Jane and the violent altercation that happened over at Jane's apartment. And so I'm thinking, if the judge is already kind of on his mind about the whole domestic violence aspect and the physical violence that was exuded from the defendant, even just last year, I think it's possible maybe the judge, even if he hears from the family, even if he hears from Sean Combs' friends, that it's possible it might be kind of a little bit of a tougher sentence than maybe the defense was expecting.
Well, look, I think the defense might be wanting to take advantage of this, right? Now, the judge said, even though I'm denying bail and I'm looking at the violence factor, it's not a preview of what I'm going to do for sentencing. But I think this is the opportunity for the defense to submit any kind of mitigating factors and have the probation officer speak to his friends and family and talk about the impact of this. I mean, we just interviewed Charlucci the other day. So I wonder if they're saying, you know what? They said to Sean Combs, listen, let's wait for October. Gives us more time to present our case to Judge Arun Subramanian. And then we had the hearing today. This monumental hearing.
Great.
You've been in court for...
Prominent people who had made a name for themselves by being close to Diddy now had to answer impossible questions. To what extent were they aware? What had they observed? Why didn't they raise their voices? Some said they didn't know. Others evaded the cameras. However, a handful, the courageous few, came out. Producers, managers, former bodyguards, and others who had witnessed too much yet remained silent out of fear, dread of losing their reputations, their jobs, or worse. The truth was layered by their testimonies, verification of the skewed parties, information regarding the meetings held behind closed doors, and the quiet purchase by NDAs, threats, and payments. Mountains of previously sealed documents, secret financial transactions, private investigator reports, and sworn affidavits were discovered by the press. The dam was broken. The flood was unstoppable. Streaming services started removing Diddy's discography. His appearances were removed by TV networks. Public service announcements about abuse and accountability took the place of commercials that had praised his business. His entire empire started to fall apart. Diddy, meantime, had to deal with a world very different from the comfort he had once enjoyed inside the prison walls. Cold, concrete, monitoring, and routine, no velvet ropes, no entourage. Prisoners looked on in interest. His name was honored by some, but not by others. Their fame was of no value. Soon after, rumors circulated that Diddy was having trouble adjusting. Complaints, denials of requests for special treatment. Rumors of isolation, and most unsettling of all, rumors that he was unable to eat or sleep because of the weight of his sentence. The survivors found their voices once again in the public eye. Many of them, who had previously been faceless faces hiding behind charges, were now boldly visible. They set up panels, conducted interviews, and bravely and clearly told their stories, not in a hostile manner. They weren't just talking about Diddy. They dealt with a society that allowed him to flourish unchallenged. And they paid attention. Protests broke out in big cities, not in support of Diddy, but rather against the system that allowed him to operate unchallenged for so long. Signs state, accountability for all, and no more silence. What started out as a trial evolved into a movement. Every facet of the trial was examined in books, documentaries, and podcasts. Legal, psychological, and entertainment experts shared their thoughts on how this case was a watershed. And despite all, Diddy stayed in jail, a fallen hero. He made another attempt to appeal, citing judicial overreach, bias, and media influence. However, the court repeatedly rejected it. The initial sentence was upheld. 60 years, a sentence that reverberated outside of the courtroom. The music was altered. Justice was altered. It altered the story, and now, the records and the celebrity are not the first things that come to mind when someone recalls the trial. The tears that were shed in that courtroom come to mind. The hush, the sobs, the words that woke up a generation and silenced a room.